It's not every day that we have a former vice president at the Walt Disney Company on the Happy Families podcast. Today, though, is the day where that's happening. Scott Novis is a video game industry veteran, the founder of GameTruck, the largest mobile video game party company in the United States, and a dad of three. He's worked with Disney. He's created best-selling games. He's authored books. And I could go on and on about Scott Novis's pedigree. Today is a podcast you do not want to miss if you have children who game, which is pretty much everyone. Welcome to the Happy Families podcast, real parenting solutions every day on Australia's most downloaded parenting podcast. My name is Dr. Justin Coulson, and I am so excited about my conversation. Scott Novis, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me here, Justin. I appreciate it.
Right now, I reckon there's about 15 million parents who really hate you because they can't get their kids off the games that you've invented. I'm obviously stirring a little bit here, but this is an area, 92% of Australian parents are worried about the extent to which their children are on screens, whether it's social media or gaming. And while I'm on this provocative bent, there's a guy called William Su. He's a former game developer, founder of Storm 8. He knows about this as well. He's launched more than 50 mobile games. Collectively, they've been downloaded more than 1 billion times. They've generated billions of dollars in sales. And I have a quote here from a New York Times essay where he says this: "I'm very familiar with game addiction, as that's what I thought about every day for more than a decade." In brackets, he says, "We sold the company in 2020. He adds, "I hired product managers and engineers to track everything players did and analyze their behavior. Using the data we collected, we experimented with every feature of our games to see which versions allowed us to extract the most time and money from our players. For us, game addiction was by design. It meant success for our business. That's the ultimate goal," he says. This is the compelling statement that really grabs me. "That's the ultimate goal, to build habit-forming games that have players coming back every day. In other words, it takes away the decision-making. We wanted people to reach for their phones first thing in the morning and jump right into our games just as they check their social media and emails." Now, as I'm reading that, you're nodding your head. And
100%.
This is not a personal attack on you. It is a question around the game industry generally and the impact that it has on families. Now you talk to parents about how they can navigate this with their kids. It's almost like you've done a 180, I guess, in some ways. Talk to me about this, the complexity around this, and how families can have video game time, but without the fighting.
If it's okay, Justin, I want to expand on what you're talking about because that just
Great.
confirms everything that I know.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. I'm going to go back and track down that article and add it to my portfolio. I have studied game addiction for a long time, not just recently. Addiction is a complicated topic because you have chemical dependency. I learned this from Dr. Mark Coulson about what is addiction. And it turns out there's a psychological condition that people get into that is most easily described as despair. Like literally think of the word despair, to unpair. It is painful to break all of your relationships. And there's 3 modes, maladaptive strategies humans use to deal with that. So one of them is that people, think of it as a job environment. People quit. People can become reactive or toxic in the work environment, or people can drop into learned helplessness and numb out. Well, those extremes are tragic, right? Quitters, suicide. People that become reactionary, what's the extreme form of that? Violence. We've certainly seen a growth in that. And the last one is numbing becomes addiction. Now, when the data indicated for a long time that addictive play was really limited to about 7% of gamers, like 3 to 7% was a window of people that fell into that mode. But that radically changed in the last 10 years. And what really got my attention is you have these 9, 10, 11-year-old kids that are demonstrating addictive behaviors. Let's call them compulsive obsessive behaviors. What the heck? They don't have any of the hallmarks that would indicate the emotional distress. They're not socially isolated. They're not locked up. I mean, they're like in loving families that are supporting them. They're in schools. They're like, nothing about their environment should predict this behavior. What is going on? And what really came to my attention through Professor Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, was the awareness that exactly what Sue indicated, they changed the algorithm they were developing to. The algorithm we were developing to is called the self-determination theory. It's part of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's flow. It has three components: autonomy, mastery, and relatedness. And I'll come back to that. What changed is they started developing to a different algorithm. It was an algorithm that started coming out in the early 2000s. They started teaching it at Stanford and other schools, and it's called the hook algorithm. And the hook algorithm does something that is, I don't agree with it, but it's exactly what Sue talked about. We developed companies, like we did the most insane thing ever as a population. We started valuing companies on how much attention they could steal, not the value they deliver to their users. And it started in social media. It was only a matter of time before it spread to games. And notice how Sue talked about mobile games. He talked about, like, this was the turning point that is wrecking everything, is putting the internet in kids' hands 24/7. It's with them everywhere. And that is radically different than the old laptop gaming and console gaming, where you weren't going to lug your TV around with you, right? You got up and walked away. And also, most of the games were barely ever online, and they didn't need online to play. And so what did they do with the hook algorithm? So there's a couple of things that I think would help your audience understand what is actually happening and why this is so devastating for their kids. So do I have your permission to share? Because I want to back up so they can understand, like, why the hook algorithm is such a problem for kids.
Yeah, just before you step into that, self-determination theory is the very foundation of pretty much all of the work that I do. So Happy Families listeners are familiar with me talking about how children need to feel like they're gaining a sense of progress and mastery. That's the competence need.
Outstanding.
They're familiar with...
So you already know, and your audience
relatedness.
You know what I'm talking about.
And even that need for autonomy, right? The need to feel choiceful. So that makes sense. But the hook algorithm, which is, I know, something that Nir Eyal talks about in his very popular book, that's something that we don't talk about a whole lot here at all. The hijacking of neural architecture by the world's smartest people from MIT and Stanford and so on. Well, so let's step into that.
Okay, so humans are unique for a couple of reasons, a bunch of reasons, but there's two in particular. So number one, and I learned this from Gabor Mate and his book Scattered Minds. So this touches into how our brains develop, and it touches into ADHD, but also neurodivergence and what's now become the spectrum of autism, is just how our brains develop. And step one is we are the only animal that our brain quadruples in size after birth. Whales and elephants might be born with a bigger brain, but it doesn't get much bigger. Number two on the hit list of brain growth are chimpanzees with a doubling. That means fourfold increase. And by 5 years old, the average human has 90% of the brain size they're going to have as an adult, but more neural connections. That means kids are just a little bundle of potential. And if you've ever seen that, like, kindergartner, maybe learn how to throw a ball or kick, they're unskilled. That's it, right? They are just ready to get wired up to get good at something. Now, the second thing that makes humans unique in the mammalian species, every other mammal goes from birth to reproductive age as fast as possible. Our neighbor's dog was 3 years old when they had our Labrador puppy, Cookie. 3 years old, ready to reproduce. Humans don't do that. We pause for 7 years before puberty starts. 7 years. What is happening in that 7-year window? Well, there's some research that was done that indicates what's happening for kids in that 7-year window is when we absorb our culture, not just the family we're part of or the community. Like, it goes all the way to the bones. That is where you're going to build your cultural identity. If we dropped you in, let's say, Japan before, in that 7-year window, you will not only speak fluently and natively, you'll get the jokes, you'll know the food, you'll have a sense of the design and the tastes of it, the smells of it. You'll feel Japanese. If we pull you before 9, you'll lose it. If we add you after 13, you'll always feel like a foreigner, even if you learn to speak fluently. So there's some magic that's getting baked into kids' brains. Now let's go to the hook algorithm. What are they doing? We as humans don't learn the way we think we learn. We have baked into us a little trial and error loop. And what's important about that is dopamine, which we all think is sort of the achievement hormone, does something different. It really sparks learning. And when it's given in short little doses, doesn't create satisfaction, Justin. It creates craving. So if you take that little hit craving thing and you look at the trial and error, what happens is this is about behaviors, not concepts, not intellectualism. We're talking like physical movement, things that you need to do. Think about picking up, let's say, a cricket bat. You're in Australia. You're going to swing it a few times. What is your brain doing in those first few swings? It's experimenting, wait and feel. We're built for trial and error. And what you're trying to do is map my behavior to the results I get. And your brain is doing that below the level of conscious thought. You're almost not even aware that you're doing it. And so what the developers learned is that if the reward in feedback is unpredictable and variable, we can extend the window that you stay in trial and error mode. So what they did is they built an algorithm that starts with step one, the cue. So why does every app you install on your phone ask to turn on notifications? Because it's the beginning of the hook cycle. We got to cue you to do something. Then you're going to do a thing. Then we're going to give you, and this is the technical term, a variable ratio reward. It's unpredictable. And it's tuned to be just the right amount to hold your attention, get you your dopamine hit, but never let you master the algorithm. Then we're going to move you over to what's called investment. And if we're lucky, what'll happen is you will start self-cueing like a cigarette addict reaching for a cigarette. And the difference between self-determination games and hook games are self-determination is you're building skills that produce mostly reliable results that you can build on. And you will, quote, level up. You will use that skill to get a largely predictable outcome. And then we'll give you more complex things to go after, and away you go. That's progress. Hook algorithms give you illusions of progress, but what they're really trying to do is keep you stuck in this trial and error loop, hammering your dopamine to maximize your craving to the point where you can't even put it down. And that's the behavior that is absolutely driving kids and parents and everyone bonkers. It's not a game anymore. It's not entertainment. Like literally what Sue said, it is how much money can we make stealing people's attention? And guess whose attention is most vulnerable to being stolen? Your kids.
For the benefit of people who are not familiar with persuasive design elements, would you mind sharing maybe a half a dozen of the most common, the most popular persuasive design elements in the games that children play today?
Okay, so for me, I am not a designer of those games, and that's a fantastic question. So here's the hack I give parents that would be like, if you want to avoid them, there's three things you can do. So one of them is, it's simple, and I'm not trying to be, look, I don't own any stock in video game companies. I don't own a video game company, so I have no personal stake in this. But number one is buy your games, pay for the game, be the customer of the developer. Be the person that you're trying to satisfy. Number two, pick games that you can play offline, that do not demand an always-on internet connection. Remember what Sue said about, we're optimizing everything about the user behavior? They can't do that if you're offline. They don't know what you're doing. So pick games that you can play in front of a couch on a TV with the internet off. Can you play that game? If you have to be online, you've got to be extremely cautious about what you're playing, because you're dealing with a company that can now track everything you're doing and look at selling that to somebody that values it more than you do. And the other third hack is if you talk to your player and you ask them, what is hard about this game for you? What do you find interesting or challenging? If it's a skill-based game, so let's take Minecraft. Okay. Minecraft generally, in 99% of the instances, I'm not aware of an instance where that's become addictive the way these hook games are. Kids will talk about, I'm learning to use redstone. I'm building something. They talk like project managers. They have a goal. They're trying to achieve something. They might be working with friends. They could take you in the game and show you what they're doing. It is like a little world they're building. When they're dealing with a hook game, they start complaining almost instantly. This is unfair, and this is broken, and this is where you see that. Like, I can't ever remember seeing my kids rage spike a controller after playing Minecraft. But when you're in the addictive games, They don't even know what they're doing. They have a hard time describing it, but they'll begin to tell you where the game is broken, or I can't sleep at night, or like, it's almost like a trauma conversation. So one of the biggest clues is, how does your child think about and discuss playing the game? And if they're using the language of progress, you're probably playing a good game. If they're using a language that talks about suffering or things that sound like suffering or unfairness, think of it this way. Do they sound empowered, or do they sound like a victim? If they sound like a victim, get them away from that game. If they sound like they're developing skills and growing, that might be a game that spend some more time and understand what's going on there. There's a higher probability that's a safer game. But the mechanisms that I most see with the hook games are, they hide critical elements off screen. There's nothing you can do as a player to control the probability of a better outcome. Like, things just show up, like, here's a loot crate, or here's a bunch of gems, go ahead and match it. Like, the preconditions are masked from the player, and they're just presented with another situation. They're presented with another situation. And look, we see this in social media, right? The number one variable racial reward is people's fickle approval. Go talk to people that are in social media. Ask them, what's the result you're going to get on that post? They're like, I have no idea. It's all trial and error. I'm just going to keep coming back until I get one that hits, and I'm going to tune it, and I'm going to tweak it until, oh, that doesn't work anymore. And the games are now doing that faster, more systematically. Is if the outcome is detached from the behavior, if you only get that randomness reward, that's when you're in trouble.
Scott, one of my favorite things to do when I'm presenting on screens and kids in a parent setting, when I'm running one of my presentations, is to pull out the book Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. I'm sure you know it well. And there's this scene as Percy and Annabeth and Grover are racing across the United States. They're trying to save the world, trying to save his mom, all that sort of stuff. They end up in Las Vegas at the Lotus Hotel and Casino. They're exhausted. They need a break. They walk in, and instead of freshening up and getting the rest that they need, they're drawn into the games room. This is a games room, especially for kids. And Percy has this interaction where it says the whole lobby was a giant game room. And I'm not talking about cheesy old Pac-Man games or slot machines. Then he describes how incredible it was and how they started playing, and he got really into it. And he's talking to this guy called Darren, Darrin. And the guy keeps using words like groovy. And then as they're having this conversation, he realizes that he uses different language. He only feels like he's been 2 weeks in the games room, but when he asks him what year it is, Darren says 1977. Then he meets someone from 1985, someone from 1993. They all claimed they hadn't been in here very long, a few days, a few weeks at most. They didn't really know, and they didn't care. And then the penny drops. There's this moment of insight. Then it occurred to me, how long had I been here? It seemed like only a couple of hours, but was it? I tried to remember why we were here. So I love this. He's completely forgotten that he's trying to save the world because he's so enmeshed in the game. He goes over to Annabeth, still building her city. Come on, I told her. We've got to get out of here. No response. I shook her. Annabeth. She looked up annoyed. What? We need to leave. This place is a trap. Annabeth, there are people here from 1977, kids who have never aged. You check in and you stay forever. What's your response?
One of the groups of people, and one of the reasons I do what I do, I coach youth baseball for 14 years, and I'm very passionate about raising good men, but also helping other men and families raise good men. Moms will come to me because they've got a boy who's stuck in gaming. And by the time they're in their early 20s or mid 20s, and they have become hikikomori or neat, not employed in education or training, that is a heavy lift to get a kid out of that room. But if we can reach him at the age we're talking about, if we can reach him in that magic window, that 7 to 13, that 7-year window, and give them a sense of purpose and direction, and keep games as just an interesting challenge part of their lives, something fun to do, but not the sole purpose of their lives, we have a much better chance of preventing these kids from getting lost. We are missing, by some counts, 600,000 millennial men from the workforce, and Gen Z's right on their heels and Alpha right after them. And so I think that's a real thing. I think it's a real phenomena in our economy, and we're seeing it globally, where they're checking out.
Yeah.
And
And the downstream effect of that is you're not going to find somebody who's romantically interested in you, which makes it harder to form families, and it makes it harder to get the progression that's necessary to live a fulfilling and relational life, right?
in the United States, 67% of college students are now women. And in my family, some of the girls have started asking, where are the guys? Yeah, these are massive changes that are happening to our culture that have long-term implications we don't fully understand yet. But I find it hard to believe that we could be blasé about watching a huge chunk of the population just vanish.
This place is a trap. You check and you stay forever. I love it. You're a father of 3. Have any of your children had compulsive, problematic, or even addictive tendencies when it comes to games? Clearly, games have been a big part of your family's life.
Oh, yeah. Well, for me, it started with my oldest. And we didn't get into, we were really lucky in that their version of cell phones were flip phones or sidekicks with texting, like the internet, smartphone. They were not adults, but they had hit high school by the time the iPhone came out, and it was too expensive to give it to them. So they didn't really get it till college.
Yeah, my oldest is about the same, born in the late 90s, in mid-20s now, and just kind of escaped that in a way that the younger kids didn't.
Right. And I want to go back to the brain development and why it's different for a second, because the part of your head that protects you from these algorithms is your executive function. That doesn't begin to develop in humans until high school. So my kids, by the time they got smartphones, were already protected from it because their brains were finishing developing that. When you're dealing with kids that are 13 or younger or 16 or younger, they don't even have it yet. You as an adult are having a completely different experience with these games than your kids are. They don't have the circuitry in their heads to protect them from the algorithm, so they're even more vulnerable. So the issues that we had with my kids was understanding how to end game time. And this is something I've coached a lot of parents on, is how does a video game end? Like, we know how board games end. We know how sports games end, but there's a million ways that games end. And some of them you can turn off. Some of them you can't even pause. And I don't know a single parent that would walk out into the middle of a baseball pitch while their kid is getting ready to throw a pitch and grab them by the collar going, "We're going to dinner now." It would be humiliating. Nobody would do that. But I see parents do that to their kids with video games because, number one, all they see is a kid with headphones looking at a screen. They have no idea they're playing with anyone. They have no idea they're playing against another team, and they're clueless that there's an audience. During COVID, we did thousands of online tournaments for high schools and colleges, isolated kids that couldn't go anywhere. We had 9 spectators for every player. It was crazy. So for your child, emotionally ripping them out of that environment, guess what? It really them off, because it would upset anybody to get yanked out of the middle of work or lose work or whatever. And so most of the instruction I did was to help parents understand how to end game time without a fight. And the key was, number one, know how the game ends. Number 2, negotiate with your kid how they're going to end before they begin, and give them a choice. Hey, we're in the car at 5 o'clock sharp. Are you sure you want to jump in that online game with your friends? I'll play a Nintendo instead, because I can pause that. I can stop it without stress. And the third one is a thing we do thousands of times every month. When it's a few minutes before game time is over, we flick the lights in the room. We don't yell at them. We don't scream at them. We don't touch them. We flick the lights. Humans are super sensitive to peripheral vision. And when the entire lights in your room start going on and off, they're going to look up. That's your cue. Gently touch them on the shoulder and go, you have 5 minutes to wrap this up. Reinforce their sense of agency, their sense of control. They've agreed to end game time on time. And what I hear is 95 to 98% of the time, kids end, they'll wrap it up, they get up, and they move on. When it's a healthy game, I even hear this from the kids. Oh my God, I can put this game down. They feel like they've gotten agency back. They feel like they've gotten control back. And what I hear from my friends that are family therapists and psychologists is when they're playing the addictive games, it's a meltdown. And the kid is out of control. They're dysregulated. They're miserable. So it's miserable for everybody because we're giving them free games. I feel bad for parents. They think they're giving their kid a toy.
We really emphasize real solutions for parents who are struggling with this. And what you've just stepped us through there is so valuable. the challenge that I know parents are going to face as they listen to that is, but what about the 5% who don't respond? What about the 5% who, when the lights start flashing, say, no, and they start the meltdown already? Or they say, I need 15 more minutes. I'm not ready yet. What kind of response do you have for that?
Okay, so let me expand that. A lot of y'all have very smart kids. And so they will try to negotiate. Well, let me just finish this match. And then they'll jump into a match mode that never ends, right? There'll be all sorts of games they're going to play. And part of that is welcome to be an adult and a parent and work with them. I am a fan of getting off games that kids themselves lose the ability to self-terminate. If the player cannot voluntarily end the game, because that's really what the difference is, right? Is most of the friction with my kids was built around me forcing an end condition on them while they were in the middle of something engrossing. And that could be pretty disturbing. What we're talking about now is a difference between that condition and I'm hooked. And I am not a fan of hooked games. I'm like, get off of them, get away from them. There's better things to be doing with your time. There's no good outcome from being in this hooked environment. And we haven't even talked about how come none of these companies do age verification. Like there was I think it was UBS Wahlberg, and there's some analysis of some of these game platforms. I have bad news for you. Guess what? The number one platform for pedophiles is now games young kids play, free games.
Yeah, Roblox.
Yes, 100%. And you have the most valuable company on the planet, or one of them, Meta, that somehow can't manage to do age verification. We do age verification all the time in the real world. Why can't we do it online? We don't want to. They don't want to change their model. So it doesn't help parents. Like I think parents and kids deserve to have the same protections online that they get in the real world. But your question was, what do I do about the 5%? Well, I would start with one. If you're seeing that behavior, go through the question process. Can you play that game offline? Well, why don't we try moving to a game we can play offline? If you walk your way through buying a game that can be played offline and you're still seeing that, then I would encourage you to seek professional help, because your child is likely going to be suffering from compulsive gamer syndrome, I think they call it. But if you just start taking away, and this is the stuff we see over and over again, is if you detox, right? Take it away, get them out, get them moving, get them out in a natural environment, get them into nature, get them to decompress. It's like taking their phones away. Man, it makes a huge difference. And that's probably one of the single biggest things that we see is it's how dangerous the phones are and the tablets. That's where a lot of these games and shovelware come from. Some of the tips are make sure your phone has a bedtime, no screens in the bedroom at night. Lots of parents think, my kid they turn the screens off. Like, no, they don't. They wait till you fall asleep and they get up and go play again. And teachers, just ask your teachers, is my kid falling asleep in class? That's your single biggest clue that kids are sneaking more game time. I have a friend who found their son had a burner phone so they could be online with games. A burner phone. Are you kidding me? Like the lengths they're going to because they're hooked are just crazy. So part of it is getting them away from that and then getting them into an environment where they've got control. That's the biggest thing is, are these games either reinforcing their sense of agency or are these games completely deleting it? And step one is get rid of the games that are deleting their sense of agency, and then walk yourself through the progression. And if you get to the end of your rope, they really can't let it go, then you probably need help.
If we want to have effective conversations with our children about reducing screen time and gaming time, or at least making sure that it's healthier and productive than many parents feel that it is, what do you encourage parents to do? How do you guide them so that the kids aren't running around behind their back and being deceitful, or so that World War III isn't blowing up in the living room in the middle of this game?
A part of the reason I'm doing this to get out and talk is that it's tough. Like keeping phones out of the hands of kids is extremely difficult. And the world probably you and I grew up in, which is, hey, go out and play with your friends. You send kids outside today, there's nobody out there.
I say to my
There's
kids all the time, I wish you could have the childhood that I had that was it was so active, it was so social, it was so engaged in the world around us instead of sitting on the carpet in the living room and staring at a screen and being with your friends there. It's just, I feel like we lived in such a rich world relative to what we have today for the kids.
Look, let's be honest. Like my wife and I as parents struggle with how much we're on our phones. We struggle. My son was the one that came in because by the time they're in their 20s now, they are wanting to spend more time with us. He had the phone stack. We went to dinner and he goes, okay, everybody stack your phones up. Whoever pulls their phone first is paying for dinner. It was like,
I love that.
He came up with that. I love that one. That was great. But at the end of the day, it's, do they need a smartphone or do they need a phone? And when I've talked to educators, they're like, we don't want your kids on their phone in school. So there's a big movement right now in the US. I think they just passed it in New York to have phone-free schools. And I'm all for that. So some of this is we need some legislation. We need to set some ground rules. These are our communities, our economies. And I think parents need to be aware of what's happening and we need to demand protections for our kids. Until that happens, I'm currently researching what are some of the best, most effective software solutions. But what we keep hearing is whatever you install some IP blocker on the phone or you get a router or whatever, the kids just go to a website at school, they'll go to a friend's house, they'll look up how to get around it, and they get around it. And what we never had to do, I don't do in my house, but what I've heard people have success with is specifically the devices is lock them up. Like physically make sure you have that device in your hands at night, at bedtime, and it gets locked. And only the parents have access to it. And that activity makes a big difference. What I've seen now that is a new thing is schools, well-meaning schools, are giving kids Chromebooks. And the kids are getting the free games through the Chromebooks. And I've been like, go get a console. They're not that expensive compared to the misery you're suffering. And when the kid has redirected to a safer form of play, like I just hear they're like, oh my God, we can end game time without a fight. Even our son is happier and they're having healthier conversations. So Arthur Brooks talked about it is sometimes you can't eliminate something, but you can replace it. And so that's one of the keys is can you replace it with something healthier? And I'm not an expert in social media. I know girls are suffering. And what's happened is this attention stealing economy hurts boys by giving them fake agency. They're not really doing anything, but the game makes them feel like they are. So they're off pretending to do risky things and pretending to develop skills, and they're not really. And girls are seeking community and they're going out and they're pretending to seek community, but they're not really. The biggest thing we need, and this is that huge opportunity for NGOs, faith organizations, and even schools, what kids really need is they need to get out in environments where they're face-to-face, doing something at the same time, and high commitment. Hard to join, hard to leave. So they have a reason to stick together and work out all the bumbling social awkwardness that is part of growing up and learning to be human.
Scott, we need to start to move towards conclusion. Are you up for a lightning round? Yes, no questions, short answers.
I'll do my best.
I know that whenever I do one of these, I'm like, oh, but there's so much more I want to say. Let's see how we go. If you do need to expand, let's keep it really tight. Question number one, and these are intentionally meant to be provocative. Number one, are parents who allow high levels of, if not unlimited, gaming access failing their children?
No, I cannot say that definitively.
Did your Disney background make you more lenient about screen time than other parents that you've seen?
No, I was already in the video game industry before I joined Disney.
Roblox, yes or no?
No, absolutely not.
Fortnite, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Minecraft?
Yes.
We talked about this before, but I'd like to get some clarity on it. Is the gaming industry deliberately designing addictive mechanics that target children?
There are studios and companies that are doing what you're describing. There are many companies that are not. It is a diverse industry, and there are some great companies out there producing great, engaging entertainment. And that's part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm angry that the industry I love that can create fun, compelling, great entertainment is being co-opted by thieves. It's not right.
Scott, do you believe violent games desensitize children to real-world violence?
Man, no. I've read enough studies to indicate that's likely not true.
Is the rise of gaming culture creating a generation that is less equipped for physical and face-to-face social realities and challenges?
I didn't get to talk about it, but we were seeing a rise in what they're calling synthetic or virtual autism. Staring at glass is breaking the kids' connection between how their behavior affects other people. They don't recognize the cues.
Wow.
They're becoming face blind. They're losing the ability to read other people's emotions. And we're seeing a up to 4 or 5 year degradation or slowdown in social emotional intelligence. Like, there's data to indicate this is true. This is not an opinion.
And the last question, do you think the metaverse will eventually replace traditional childhood experiences?
Here's what we're fighting is, if it's not the metaverse, this was the whole premise behind Jonathan Haidt's book, is that we've moved to a phone-based childhood instead of a play-based childhood. We need to get back to a play-based childhood, because you're priming the culture our kids are absorbing is now internet culture, not our culture, not real world culture, but an environment that prioritizes novelty over norms. And normlessness is really deeply unhealthy for humans. We need a community to be a part of, to experience our individuality. Individuality in isolation is not individuality, it's pain. And so, yeah, I really am a firm believer now that we have to get back to a play-based childhood.
Scott, you're doing amazing work. The conversation that we had today is so important for parents whose kids love to game, and you've provided us with some, number one, great information, but number two, some really practical strategies to assist when things get tricky around kids, screens, games, and the conflict that can ensue. As we wrap up, is there anything that you want people to know?
There's one thing we didn't touch on, is it's very important to me, at least this is something I try to coach a lot of parents on, is focus on that social emotional development. I don't get obsessed with absolute screen time. If my kids are in front of a console playing with their friends in person, hours, let them have at it, right? It's a social, engaging interaction dynamic. If they're online by themselves playing with God knows who, or they're on their phone playing with God knows who, 10 or 15 minutes might be too long. And so it's really about what is the social environment that they're learning from. And that's the piece that we want to optimize around. And I encourage parents, play the games with your kids. If you can't play with them, that's another big red flag. In fact, playing badly is a gift, because these kids are not seeing what it looks like to struggle. Everybody's presenting perfect appearances online, in games, and social media. And so they think they're the only ones struggling emotionally. Show them what it looks like for a mature adult to struggle to learn to do something well, and normalize those behaviors with them. What I hear over and over again from parents is it dramatically changes the conversations they have with their kids around gaming and around how their kids are feeling.
Scott, such a valuable discussion. If people want more information about you and what you do, where should they go and how can they be in touch? ScottNovis.com is my personal website. I wish we had operations in Australia. GameTruck.com is if you want to know more about the company I founded. But if you want to reach me, ScottNovis.com is the best way to reach out to me. And I'm most active on LinkedIn. We'll link to all of those resources in the show notes. Scott, it's been such a privilege, such a delight to have you on, and so grateful for what you've shared. Thank you. Was that helpful? So helpful. I know every parent who's listening is going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do the lights. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. For more information about making your family happier, you can visit us at happyfamilies.com.au and check out some of my webinars about keeping kids in healthy relationships with their screens. happyfamilies.com.au.